They wheeled me out of surgery at 4:12 a.m. By 6:03, my bank account had been drained. The bright white lights of the recovery room stung his eyes like betrayal. Ryan blinked twice, wincing as the dull ache of the abdominal incision rippled through his side. A nurse leaned over him, smiling like she'd just saved his life, and perhaps she had. A 6-hour surgery to remove a malignant tumor in his liver. Successful, they said. Lucky to catch it in time, they said, but none of them knew that the real bleeding was happening somewhere else. 30 minutes later, groggy and alone, Ryan reached for his phone. It had been silenced for over a day, tucked away in a plastic bag along with his wedding ring and wallet. He keyed in the passcode with trembling fingers. Dozens of notifications exploded across the screen. Missed calls from his bank, a fraud alert, and a chilling message from a friend. "Hey man, saw your joint account is empty. Everything okay?" His heart pounded, harder than it had in weeks. He opened the banking app. Zorochuruz, the number glared at him. Cold, absolute, final. He refreshed. Again, then again. Nothing changed. The account, his and Melissa's joint account, was cleared out, vanished. $122,000 gone. A decade of savings, bonus stock from his tech job, emergency funds, wedding gifts, every cent accounted for. Until now. The pain in his side sharpened, not from the incision, but from a deeper wound. Betrayal. It clawed through his ribs like rusted glass. He scrolled through the transactions, eyes scanning frantically. The withdrawals were methodical. $9,800, $9,800, $9,800. The maximum allowed per day without triggering automatic alerts. And they had started the morning after his surgery was scheduled. She timed it. Planned it. She knew he would be unconscious, immobile, drugged out of his mind. He texted Melissa. "Are you okay? What happened to our account?" No response. He called. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. By the 5th attempt, the line was disconnected. Ryan looked down at the hospital gown. No ring, no wallet, no wife. A nurse entered quietly, checking his vitals. "Do you know where my wife is?" he asked, voice strained. "She left yesterday afternoon," the nurse replied. "She said you wouldn't want her to stay overnight." That was a lie. They both knew it. Melissa never wanted to be near hospitals. Said they made her feel helpless. He lay still for several minutes, the ceiling above him blurring. Not from medication, but from rage slowly distilling into clarity. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. Precise, calculated, brutal theft. By someone who kissed him the night before surgery and said, "I'll be waiting when you wake up." She had waited, just long enough to empty everything they'd built together. His phone buzzed. A second fraud alert. This time from his investment account. Login attempt from an unrecognized device in Tampa, Florida. Ryan's hand clenched the phone. He knew what had to be done. He wasn't just a husband anymore. He was a target. And if Melissa thought the surgery had left him too weak to fight, then she didn't know who she married. She thought I wouldn't wake up, but I did. And I'm coming for everything she stole. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and absence. Hers most of all. The morning air was thin as Ryan stepped out of the hospital's front doors 2 days earlier than advised. He signed his own discharge papers. The attending doctor tried to argue, but Ryan's jaw was locked, his gaze fixed. Painkillers dulled the worst of the ache, but nothing could numb the hollow void Melissa had left behind. He held a cab. No one was coming to pick him up. As the city rolled past the window, Ryan stared blankly, mind replaying the last few weeks like corrupted footage. Melissa had been off, quieter, shorter with her answers. Her phone always face down on the table. He chalked it up to stress, to the fear of losing him in surgery. She cried the night before he went in, kissed his forehead, whispered, "Come back to me." What a farce. The apartment was colder than he remembered. The door was locked, but nothing inside remained the same. Her shoes were gone from the rack. Drawers stood half open, emptied in a rush or maybe with deliberate finality. Her favorite mug was missing from the kitchen. A single fork sat in the drying rack. He moved room to room, each one echoing louder than the last. The walk-in closet on her side was bare. The jewelry box she never traveled without? Gone. The expensive duffel he gave her for their anniversary? Missing. All that remained was the lingering trace of her perfume, bergamot and lavender, now nauseating. He stepped into the study and found the printer tray emptied, but one crumpled piece of paper still sat in the bin. A boarding pass. One way, Chicago O'Hare to Tampa International. Departed 2 days ago. Her full name printed cleanly. It all clicked into place. She had waited until he was under anesthesia, rushed home, packed, moved out, and ran. Not just away from the hospital, but from the marriage, the life they built, the man who trusted her. There was no note, no text, no explanation, just a data trail. He opened the laptop she left behind. It had been wiped, not just logged out, fully wiped, reformatted. Even the BIOS password was changed. He stared at the black screen, jaw clenching. Melissa wasn't running in panic. She was executing a plan. They had been together 7 years, married for 3. In that time, they had combined finances, started an investment portfolio, paid off student loans, or so he thought. Ryan had handled most of the banking. Melissa preferred it that way. Said she trusted him. Now, it was clear she'd been playing the long game, quietly learning the contours of their assets, slowly embedding herself just deep enough to extract everything she could when the moment was right. And the moment was during his most vulnerable hour. He walked over to the kitchen table, dropped into the chair, and stared at the empty plate where her keys used to sit. He tried to picture her exit, what she wore, how far she moved, if she looked back. The buzzer rang. It was the mailman holding a single certified envelope. Ryan signed with a shaky hand. The return address was a Florida P.O. box. Inside, divorce papers, filed 2 days before his surgery. Grounds, irreconcilable differences. There it was. The final insult. She hadn't just left. She had timed the legal betrayal down to the hour. His lawyer, Marcus, an old friend from college, answered on the second ring. "I need to retain you, today," Ryan said flatly. "And I need to know how fast we can file a restraining order on shared financial accounts." Marcus didn't ask questions. He knew Ryan's tone, knew that whatever happened, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ryan leaned back in the chair, the weight of everything pressing on his chest, but no longer paralyzing her. She thought she could disappear, that he'd be too broken to respond, but silence wasn't surrender, and her exit wasn't clean. He picked up his phone and opened the first folder of documentation. Account numbers, access logs, shared authorizations. She ran, but she left footprints, and I know how to follow them. A marriage doesn't collapse in a day. It fractures quietly, piece by piece, until all that's left is a shell. Ryan sat at the edge of the bed they once shared, surrounded by files. Not legal ones yet. Memory files, fragments, moments, clues. Every marriage has arguments, disagreements, periods of distance. But now, in hindsight, each small crack looked more like a warning flare he hadn't noticed, or chose not to. Melissa never wanted a joint account. That was the first one. "I just don't like mixing finances," she said on the drive back from their honeymoon in Maui, her voice breezy, almost playful. "You make more. It's only fair you keep control." At the time, it felt selfless, respectful. Ryan, the rising tech engineer, had been pulling in double her income. He appreciated the gesture. He thought she was protecting his success. In truth, she was studying it, defining its limits. She hadn't been reckless with money, at least not in any obvious way. No wild spending, no mystery credit cards, just small behaviors. Passwords she refused to share. Shredded receipts, the burner phone he once found and dismissed as her cousin's backup. She'd always been guarded about her phone. "Privacy is healthy," she said, and Ryan agreed, until now. Then there were the trips. 4 months before his diagnosis, she had started traveling more often. For work, she claimed. Conferences, trainings, most out of state. She brought back hotel soaps and flyers to prove it, but there were gaps. He'd text her during these trips and sometimes get no reply for hours. Her excuses were believable. Poor reception, overbooked schedules, too tired to talk. One trip stood out, Tampa, 2 months ago. Melissa said it was a nursing convention, but when Ryan asked for photos, she brushed him off. "It was just a conference hall and bad coffee," she laughed. No selfies, no group shots. Just one blurry skyline photo, downloaded, he now realized, from Google Images. Back then, he didn't press, didn't want to be that husband. Now every one of those silences sounded like screaming. He flipped open her old planner. She had left it behind, likely assuming it was useless. Melissa had gone digital 2 years ago, but this one was older, 2019. Inside the back cover, scrawled in tight cursive, was a single name circled twice. Daniel Martin. No context, just the name, and a phone number. Ryan searched his inbox. Nothing. Then he searched hers. She hadn't wiped the shared cloud account. A mistake. A single draft email, never sent, sat in the drafts folder under a forgotten subfolder titled Me Time. The draft was addressed to Daniel. "I told you he's going in for surgery next month. After that, I'll have access to everything. You just need to be ready on your end. Love you. M." It was dated 6 weeks ago. Ryan froze. The rage that surged inside him wasn't hot. It was ice cold, focused, dangerous. This wasn't betrayal out of emotion. It wasn't a messy, impulsive affair. It was architectural. This had been designed. He checked Daniel Martin's number against a background tracing tool. Florida. His address matched the hotel Melissa had stayed in last week. She had never traveled alone. She had gone to meet him, to set up their escape. Ryan pulled up the family calendar, the one they used to sync their schedules. She'd removed every trace of her trips, but left his on full display, including his surgery date, marked in red. R's procedure, 10 a.m. She hadn't just known, she had planned around it. Every moment she had played the part, loving wife, concerned partner, financial minimalist, had been strategy. It wasn't just about stealing money, it was about executing the perfect disappearance. Except it wasn't perfect. She had left behind fingerprints, a draft email, an old planner, a naive trust in his passivity. Ryan closed the planner, stood up, and walked toward the safe in the closet. Inside were his hard drives, encrypted backups, copies of all their joint account authorizations. He pulled out the drives, set them on the desk, and began cataloging. Not as a husband, as a prosecutor preparing a case. She cracked the foundation, now I'll bring the whole house down. Emotion fades, but numbers, they testify. Ryan's apartment had become a war room. Screens glowed with spreadsheets, transaction logs, archived emails. Every line of data was a breadcrumb, each dollar a witness. If Melissa wanted to vanish into clean air, she should have known better than to cross someone who had spent a decade reverse engineering financial fraud systems. He started with the joint account, $122,000, accumulated over 8 years, stock bonuses, consulting income, savings from skipped vacations. Gone. But not in one sweep. Melissa had played the system, exploiting withdrawal caps. 14 days, 22 withdrawals, each just under the $10,000 flag that would alert federal reporting. Clever, but not invisible. Ryan mapped out the movement, initial draws into their joint checking, then into a PayPal account registered to an LLC, Coastal Pine Ventures. He had never heard of it. A quick check with the Illinois Secretary of State showed the company had been registered 3 months ago, under Melissa's maiden name. That was the first layer of laundering. From there, funds were split, half wired to a credit union in Florida, half converted into crypto via Coinbase, routed through a new wallet ID. No history, no attached identity, but the wallet had been accessed using a known IP. Ryan ran the IP through a VPN detector. It pinged off a residential address in Clearwater, Daniel Martin's address. He cross-referenced against Airbnb logs, Melissa's booking history, accessed via the shared Gmail recovery key she forgot to change. One reservation stood out, a one-bedroom loft in Tampa, booked for 3 weeks. Guest name? Marla Jensen. But the phone number used for verification matched Melissa's old pharmacy records. A lazy alias. He wasn't dealing with masterminds. He was dealing with amateurs who thought the average man wouldn't look twice. Melissa had bet on emotional paralysis. She forgot Ryan dealt in numbers for a living. Next, the investment portfolio. Melissa had liquidated his short-term treasury ladder, $17,000, using an e-signature. The bank flagged the transaction, but ultimately released the funds, citing shared spousal authorization. But Ryan had never given such access. He called the brokerage firm. "Yes, sir," the manager confirmed. The transfer was verified via a recorded phone call. "Would you like a copy for your records?" He listened to the recording that night. Melissa's voice. Calm, practiced, even, cheerful. "Yes, my husband just got out of surgery. He asked me to move the funds to cover an urgent family medical situation. I have his permission." No hesitation, no stutter, just smooth deceit wrapped in urgency. Ryan saved the recording into a folder labeled Exhibit A, Financial Fraud. The deeper he dug, the more the patterns emerged. Fake names on transfers, coordinated withdrawal times matching his surgery schedule, a new P.O. box opened in Tampa 2 weeks prior, 3 prepaid burner phones purchased at Walgreens, a hotel reservation in Daniel's name booked with Ryan's airline miles. She hadn't just emptied the account, she had weaponized every shared asset. He cross-checked their home Wi-Fi router logs. She had connected a device labeled DM Work Phone 2 nights before he was admitted. That was the moment Daniel had entered the house. Ryan was already sleeping on the couch, recovering from pre-op nausea. She had brought her accomplice under his roof. He paused, letting that sink in. This wasn't just about theft, this was contempt. And contempt, he knew, was a fatal miscalculation. He contacted his old friend from Quantrix, a private cybersecurity firm. "I need a digital autopsy," Ryan said. "Everything she touched, every login, IP trail, file transfer, I want it logged and timestamped." He forwarded the entire data packet. Withdrawal logs, IP lookups, call recordings, screenshots. The reply came 2 hours later. "You've already built a case stronger than most we've seen go to court. Want us to help freeze the crypto wallet?" Ryan smiled for the first time in days. "Yes, and trace the outgoing transfer. I want to know what hotel room she's sitting in when the screen goes dark." He leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. The pain in his side was still there, but it no longer mattered. Melissa had thought she could vanish behind dollar signs and fake names, but in the end, the numbers don't lie. She bled the account, now I'll bleed her paper trail dry. She thought she burned the paper trail, but I still had the smoke. Ryan had learned long ago that the real currency of control wasn't just money, it was access. Digital access, passwords, logins, device authorizations. Melissa had taken the physical cash, but she'd left behind a shadow in the networks, fingerprints scattered across apps, backups, cloud syncs. And Ryan knew exactly how to read them. He booted his secure workstation and opened Signal Vault, a forensic tool normally used by enterprise security teams. It allowed him to map and replay device logins, including approximate geolocation of access events. Melissa had used the same MacBook for years, and while she'd wiped it before leaving, she hadn't revoked the cloud keychain he'd configured for her when they first moved in together. A rookie mistake. Within minutes, Ryan was inside her synced browser history, password vault, and metadata trails. She had logged into 5 different financial accounts using a proxy IP. Clever, but not clever enough. Each time she used two-factor authentication, it pinged an old backup device. His work-issued tablet, sitting idle in the closet, long forgotten. He powered it up. It buzzed instantly. Code 778139, Bank of Florida. New device access. He tapped into the log. Melissa had accessed a new checking account just 17 minutes ago. The name on the account was Jensen M. Her fake identity, same pattern as before, slow siphoning into a crypto exchange, this time using a new wallet ID. Ryan copied the address. Not to stop it, not yet. He wanted to track how deep she'd go. He turned to the email cache, thousands of archived messages from a shared recovery inbox. He filtered for keyword, Daniel, a dozen hits. The emails painted a story, not love letters. Not romantic drivel, logistics, spreadsheets. Timeline 3.x a PowerPoint titled Mutual Rebuild Plan. These weren't cheaters on a whim, they were planners, calculating every move. He opened the spreadsheet. It listed every asset Ryan owned, complete with estimates of liquidation value, stocks, real estate, even personal items, watches, artwork, camera gear, each marked with status. Taken, pending, or unknown. One row stood out, 401k, Vanguard access, pending, needs signature scan. Ryan's blood chilled. They weren't finished. Melissa and Daniel had planned to hit retirement assets next, ones that carried early withdrawal penalties, but also loopholes if justified as medical hardship. He minimized the file and opened a secure PDF editor. Inside his encrypted folder, he found the original notarized signature forms from his last rollover. They were scanned and watermarked. If Melissa tried to use these for digital forgery, it would be detectable. He uploaded them to a forensic software that detects tampering. 5 minutes later, confirmation came. A forged version had already been created. Melissa had cloned his signature and uploaded a fake form using Ryan's scanned ID, time-stamped 2 days prior to surgery. He flagged the form, reported it to Vanguard fraud team, and submitted a formal affidavit. Her attempt to steal the 401k had just failed, and now she was on record. But Ryan wasn't finished. He moved to the shared life folder on their old Google Drive. Most of it was empty, but buried under vacation photos and recipe PDFs, he found a single DOX titled Letters. Inside, a resignation letter from Melissa's job at the pharmacy. Dated 1 week before the surgery, no notice, just, I am moving out of state for family reasons. She had quit before making her move. Ryan checked the metadata. The file was saved at 2:37 a.m., the night before she kissed him goodbye. Calculated. Then he turned to her social media. Melissa had deleted her Instagram, but not before a few stories went live during her Tampa trip. Ryan pulled them from the archive folder she forgot to disable. In one photo, blurred in the background, was Daniel's reflection in a mirror. Shirtless, holding her phone, he ran the photo through EXIF scan. GPS coordinates embedded in the image matched a boutique condo near Clearwater. Ryan opened a new tab. He entered the condo's address into Zillow. Owned by Coastal Pine Ventures, her shell company. Everything connected, but instead of rage, Ryan felt precision. Measured steps, clean logic. He compiled the data, PDFs, email headers, audio files, images, and compressed them into a digital case file titled Operation Reclamation. He uploaded a copy to his lawyer and another to the private investigator Marcus had recommended. This wasn't revenge, this was restitution, rebuilt bite by bite. She used passwords to betray me, I'll use them to expose her. She crossed state lines and thought she disappeared, but ghosts leave echoes, and I knew how to listen. By the time Ryan's investigator touched down in Florida, the trail was no longer cold, it was glowing. The address in Clearwater wasn't just a dead lead, it was an active site. Ryan had traced 3 separate Uber Eats deliveries to the location in the past week, each under different names, but all paid through the same digital wallet, the one tied to Melissa's alias. The condo itself, a sleek second-floor unit inside a gated complex, was listed under Coastal Pine Ventures, the same shell company used to reroute funds from their joint account. It was elegant in its laziness. A false corporate shell, an untraceable rental, a fake name with a real address. But Ryan didn't fly down himself, not yet. His side still burned from surgery, and he knew Melissa would be watching flight records. She had access once, old travel profiles, airline accounts. He couldn't afford to tip his hand. Instead, he deployed Jason, a licensed investigator who specialized in high-asset divorce surveillance, former sheriff's deputy, smart, quiet, exact. Jason camped out for 3 days in a rental car across the street watching, logging patterns. On the third day, she appeared. Melissa stepped out of the condo's glass doors, wearing sunglasses too large for her face, holding a yoga mat, confident, relaxed, like she hadn't stolen a man's life. Beside her, Daniel trailed like a dog on a leash, juggling keys and a gym bag. Jason captured clear photos, timestamps, facial matches, license plate scans. Their routine was predictable: morning errands, late lunch, and evenings inside. No job, no obligations, just stolen comfort, but they were sloppy. Jason spotted a delivery slip in the condo's trash bin, discarded without shredding. It showed Melissa's real phone number, listed under a guest Wi-Fi account. That was enough. Ryan called the condo's property manager under the guise of a utility technician. He requested confirmation of the tenant's service transfer. "I just need to verify the primary name on the lease at Unit 202. You've got a new request pending." "Oh yeah," the manager said, distracted. "That's Coastal Pine, right? Transfer's going through Friday." "And the authorized contact?" "Melissa Jennings, I think." "Wait, no, Jensen?" "Yeah, Melissa Jensen." Ryan ended the call and exhaled. She wasn't hiding. She was rebirthing herself. Melissa Jensen, her new name, new signature, new life. But no matter how many masks she wore, the foundation was built on Ryan's blood. He pinged Marcus. "I have visual confirmation. She's using stolen assets to fund an interstate move and living under a false identity. Time to escalate." Marcus responded within an hour. The team had already begun drafting a motion for injunctive relief, blocking any further asset transfers or name changes. Ryan also authorized a temporary financial injunction, freezing all remaining shared funds under emergency protection. Then came the most important move, the court order for service. Melissa had to be served in person. Clean, documented, irrefutable. Jason arranged the delivery. The next morning, as Melissa and Daniel exited their front gate for another lazy brunch, a man in a polo shirt approached. "Melissa Jensen?" She nodded, startled. "You've been served." He handed over the thick envelope and walked away before she could react. Jason snapped a final picture. Melissa frozen, papers in hand, face draining of color as the words "petition for fraudulent dissolution and restitution of assets" stared back at her. Ryan received the photo a minute later. He stared at it for a long time. She didn't look like a criminal, not in the traditional sense. No ski mask, no getaway car, just designer sneakers and a smirk wiped clean by consequence. But he didn't feel triumph. Not yet. This was still foreplay. The real reckoning was coming. Courtrooms, sworn statements, subpoenaed emails, discovery requests that would pull the entire scheme into daylight. He closed the photo and opened his calendar. Court date set, 2 weeks. He had time, and he would use every minute. "She vanished into Florida like a ghost, but I brought the sun. She built a second life out of my money, but the man she built it with was already hollow." Ryan wasn't surprised Melissa had fled to Florida. He was surprised she fled with Daniel Martin, a man whose name had been nothing more than a passing footnote in their past. At least, until now. They had met before, once, briefly. Melissa introduced him 3 years ago at a wedding in Chicago. "Just a friend from pharmacy school," she'd said, dismissively. Ryan remembered the handshake, firm but guarded, the eyes that lingered just a second too long, the way Melissa stood between them like a barrier, not a bridge. Back then, it didn't register. Now, it was radioactive. While Jason's surveillance continued from the outside, Ryan dove into Daniel's digital trail. It was thinner than Melissa's. She'd at least tried to play professional. Daniel didn't care for masks. He left his footprints wide open. A quick search through the state's business filings showed Daniel as a listed officer in 3 companies over the last 5 years. 2 had been dissolved. 1, Gulf Horizon Realty, was under investigation for misrepresenting property values in foreclosure deals. No formal charges, just quiet dissolution and sealed settlements. Melissa hadn't just run off with a man, she had run off with a liability. Ryan traced Daniel's phone number using a cached WhatsApp login from Melissa's browser session. The profile picture was blurry, but it showed a glass of champagne next to a Rolex, same one Melissa had bought Ryan for their 5th anniversary. Stolen, rewrapped, reworn. The messages told a fuller story. Though encrypted, the cached snippets revealed headers and timestamps. The longest string of messages came the day before Ryan's surgery, 5:41 a.m. He won't know a thing, trust me. 5:42 a.m. Just make sure the condo paperwork is finalized. 5:43 a.m. And don't screw this up, Daniel. This is our shot. Ryan paused. The tone was telling. Melissa wasn't being manipulated. She was directing. She had always presented herself as passive, accommodating even. But behind the scenes, she was orchestrating a joint operation. Or so she thought. He ran a financial trace on Daniel's last known employer. Unemployed for 14 months. The Florida condo, officially owned by Coastal Pine Ventures, had a mortgage under Daniel's name, but the payments had come directly from Melissa's new account. Every bill, every expense, from HOA fees to grocery delivery, was funded by her. Correction, by Ryan. Daniel had no skin in the game, no investment, no loss, which made him dangerous. Ryan called Marcus. If we apply pressure, who breaks first, her or him? Daniel, Marcus said without hesitation. He has no legal protection, no spousal privilege, and a criminal record. Ryan didn't flinch. Then squeeze. That afternoon, a second subpoena was issued, this one directed at Daniel Martin. It demanded full financial disclosure, phone records, email history, and real estate contracts. It was framed under conspiracy to commit financial fraud, citing Melissa's use of joint marital funds in establishing false business entities. The knock came while Daniel was alone. Jason, posted nearby, captured the scene from afar. Daniel opening the door shirtless, laughing with a coffee mug in hand, until he saw the badge. A federal investigator handed him the papers. His face collapsed, not in rage, in panic. He wasn't a partner in crime. He was a passenger in a sinking ship. The next day, Ryan received a quiet text from Marcus. We just got a call. Daniel's lawyer wants to talk. Full cooperation on the table. Immunity request pending. Ryan stared at the message for a long moment. Melissa had bet on Daniel being loyal, but loyalty is expensive, and Daniel, he couldn't afford it. Now the man she used as her escape hatch was flipping. Which meant the entire structure, her lies, her shell company, her new identity, was about to cave from the inside. Ryan opened a new folder on his desktop and titled it Leverage. Inside, he dropped Daniel's subpoena, the financial audit, and the call log between them. The collection was growing, a case built not just on betrayal, but on arithmetic, on accountability, on witnesses who wanted out. Melissa had hidden inside a shell company within a shell marriage, but the shell had cracked. You don't build a new life with rotten wood, and now she'll watch it splinter. She built her freedom on my silence. I built my revenge in hers. For the first time in weeks, Ryan didn't open with anger. He opened with silence, the kind that settles just before a system goes dark. Melissa had always underestimated him. To her, Ryan was steady, not strategic, responsible, not ruthless, the type who followed the rules and forgave faster than he should. But she'd never seen what he looked like when he stopped trying to save the relationship and started preparing to end it, permanently. It began with the freeze. Marcus submitted a motion for emergency asset protection, requesting an injunction across all known financial platforms tied to the marital estate. The court, reviewing the documented evidence, the forged signature, the diverted funds, the false name, granted a preliminary freeze within 24 hours. Melissa's accounts were now flagged. So were her credit lines, crypto wallets, and even her airline reward points. Ryan had taken back control of every account she'd used: American Express, Chase, Vanguard, Fidelity, Apple Pay, Venmo, PayPal, Coinbase. In total, 7 platforms, 12 accounts, all traced and halted. But he didn't stop there. He contacted Safeguard, a private banking fraud response service typically reserved for high net worth clients. He explained the fraud, supplied case IDs, subpoenas, transaction ledgers. Within an hour, they coordinated with 4 institutions and placed Melissa on a watch list for suspicious activity across banking networks. If she tried to open a new account, it would be flagged. She'd effectively been shadow banned from the financial system she once exploited. Ryan didn't notify her. That was part of the plan. He wanted her to feel it herself. The first sign came quietly. Melissa attempted to transfer $3,500 from a personal debit account to Daniel's business card. Denied. The next morning, she tried to refill a prescription online. Payment failed. An hour later, DoorDash declined her order, then Uber, then Amazon. It wasn't sudden, it was suffocating, and Jason, still watching from across the condo complex, described the moment perfectly. She stood in the parking lot, phone in one hand, frozen, like she saw a ghost. Daniel came out. They started arguing. He stormed off. Ryan smiled. Daniel's immunity had been accepted under one condition: full cooperation, including surrendering his phone data. The prosecutors had just received a copy of Melissa's planning texts. They were damning. "He won't fight, he's too soft. Once he's under, we hit the accounts. Worst case, we vanish for a year, then settle." Ryan read the messages aloud once, then burned them into memory. She hadn't just stolen his money, she'd gambled on his character, and lost. Meanwhile, the press had caught wind of the case. A local legal blog published a short post. "Chicago man fights back after wife drains account during surgery." It didn't name Melissa directly, but it didn't need to. People knew. Friends reached out. Old co-workers sent messages. Some were in shock, others weren't. "She always had a strange vibe, man. Can't believe she finally snapped like that. You deserve better. You always did." Ryan wasn't looking for pity. He was gathering witnesses. He submitted 6 written testimonies to Marcus, each one detailing behaviors: manipulation, evasiveness, financial secrecy. It painted a picture of intent, critical, improving premeditated fraud, especially now that the case was heading toward open court. Then came the moment of silence. Melissa stopped responding to Daniel. He was no longer useful to her, and she knew it. Her calls to lawyers were intercepted by court injunctions. She tried to change her identity again, this time under Marla Jennings, filing for a driver's license update in Florida. It was flagged, denied. Ryan had locked every exit. Now, she sat in that condo with dwindling cash, frozen cards, a disgraced partner, and a legal war she couldn't afford. And Ryan, he was quiet, focused, cold. You don't need to scream when you're winning. You just need to shut the doors one by one until they realize they're trapped. She filed for divorce like it was a clean cut. Now the blade turns back toward her. The courtroom was colder than Ryan expected. Not the air, but the energy. Clinical. No one made eye contact. Just attorneys shuffling paper, clerks typing, and a judge whose gavel looked more worn than authoritative. Ryan arrived early, dressed in a dark charcoal suit, no tie, hair cut short. Not to impress, to signal readiness. Marcus sat beside him, calm as always. "This isn't just a divorce hearing anymore," he said quietly. "It's an opening salvo." Melissa entered 20 minutes late. Not flustered, not ashamed, just hollow. Her once polished demeanor had dulled. Hair tied back, makeup light, no wedding ring, no remorse. She didn't look at Ryan, not once. Her attorney, some discount hire from Tampa, walked in behind her, shuffling folders with a nervous edge. Ryan already knew he was unprepared. The man had requested a 3-week extension to gather financial clarity. The judge denied it. Court began. Marcus opened strong. "Your Honor, we move to immediately transition this case from a standard dissolution of marriage into a bifurcated proceeding, civil and criminal, due to the presence of material fraud, identity misrepresentation, and attempted financial laundering." The courtroom shifted. Melissa's lawyer objected. "Objection on scope. These accusations are unfounded and outside the jurisdiction of divorce court." Marcus didn't blink. "We're not accusing, we're providing evidence. Your Honor, Exhibit A through F." He handed over a thick packet. Inside, showing forged signature comparisons, audio of Melissa posing as Ryan to liquidate investments, texts outlining the scheme, shell company registrations, surveillance images, Daniel's signed affidavit. The judge read for 3 minutes in silence. When she looked up, her tone changed. "Mrs. Morgan, you are hereby instructed to provide full financial disclosure of all assets, shell corporations, accounts, and crypto holdings. Failure to comply within 7 days will trigger a contempt charge and freeze across all known entities." Melissa's eyes narrowed. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering furiously, but Ryan could see it in her face. The shell was cracking. The calm, calculated Melissa was slipping. Next came the motion for injunctive relief to bar Melissa from moving, hiding, or accessing funds without court approval. Granted. Then the motion for temporary spousal support denial citing fraud and abandonment. Also granted. Ryan didn't need the money, he needed the message. Every motion passed was another brick in the wall closing around her. Melissa tried to object. "Your Honor, I didn't intend harm. My client was under emotional stress. She believed Mr. Morgan was dying." Marcus rose calmly. "And yet she filed for divorce 2 days before his surgery, not after. Her actions speak louder than intention." The judge nodded. "This court recognizes a pattern of strategic concealment and intentional deception. This is not a matter of emotional grief. It is calculated financial subterfuge." Melissa's attorney requested a recess. Denied. The judge continued. "The state will schedule a criminal pre-hearing review within 14 business days. Should the findings support probable cause, formal charges will proceed under financial crimes and marital asset fraud." Melissa flinched. The war had begun, not emotional warfare. Legal, documented, weighted, real. As the session closed, the judge looked directly at her. Mrs. Morgan, you will not leave the state. You will not transfer funds. You will not contact the plaintiff outside legal channels. This court will not tolerate games. Dismissed. The gavel echoed. Melissa stood slowly. For a brief second, she looked at Ryan. No tears, no apology, just a flicker of something foreign, recognition. The man she thought was soft had turned steel. Outside the courtroom, Marcus exhaled. That's the hardest day, he said. The rest is just the machinery grinding her down. Ryan nodded. He wasn't celebrating. War wasn't about moments, it was about attrition. Melissa had initiated this fight with ink and a deception. Now she would drown in the very contracts she once weaponized. She tried to end the marriage with a form. I'll end her schemes with a verdict. She didn't just steal money, she stole my name, my voice, my identity, and now she'll answer for every stroke of that pen. The forged signature was the final nail. Ryan always signed the same way, precise angles, firm pressure on the R, a slight loop on the Y. Decades of muscle memory made it consistent across contracts, mortgage papers, even birthday cards. Melissa knew that. She had watched him sign checks with that hand, had probably mimicked it in idle moments long before she ever used it. But now it was Exhibit G. The document in question was a 401k early withdrawal authorization dated just 2 days before Ryan's surgery. It authorized the release of $17,000 into an external bank account under the name Marla Jensen. The signature looked passable to the untrained eye, but the forensic handwriting expert Marcus brought in saw the flaws immediately. Inconsistent pressure points, hesitation loops, and unnatural spacing. Ryan had never signed anything in all caps. Melissa had, her habits embedded even in fraud. During the pre-hearing criminal review, the evidence was presented systematically. First came the bank's voice recording, where Melissa impersonated Ryan, requesting the transaction. Then, the forged authorization form faxed from a Florida number linked to her shell company. Finally, the recipient account tied directly to Melissa's alias, which had now been confirmed as fraudulent through DMV documentation. The courtroom was silent as the specialist played the audio of Melissa's voice, casual, calm, falsely concerned. Yes, I'm authorizing the withdrawal. We have medical bills coming due. I can't log into the account myself because I'm still recovering. My wife is helping me. A lie built on Ryan's condition. The judge leaned forward. You're saying the defendant knowingly forged this signature and impersonated the plaintiff over the phone? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said, and did so using confidential medical information to bypass authentication protocols. The court clerk entered the documents into the record. Melissa's attorney squirmed. Your Honor, my client may have acted under duress. Her husband was undergoing major surgery. She feared financial collapse. But even he didn't believe it anymore. The judge didn't blink. And her solution was to create a false identity and drain his assets while impersonating him? That's not duress, that's design. Ryan watched Melissa closely. Her eyes didn't flinch, but her hands did. They gripped the edge of the table just a little too tight, the knuckles pale. For the first time, the mask was slipping, and underneath wasn't shame. It was calculation, losing traction. That afternoon, the Department of Financial Regulation opened a parallel investigation into Melissa's actions. Since the transaction had crossed state lines, it now triggered federal jurisdiction. Marcus explained the escalation in cold terms. She didn't just commit fraud, she committed wire fraud, identity theft, and financial impersonation across federal banking systems. Felonies, all of them. And Daniel, now fully flipped, he turned over emails, text messages, and even a scanned PDF Melissa had sent him titled Final Pool Plan. Inside, detailed instructions on how to bypass bank verification, a fake notarization template, and a list of fallback accounts in the Cayman Islands she had considered using. Though they hadn't yet acted on those accounts, the intent alone was enough to support conspiracy to defraud charges. Melissa had thought she was meticulous, but she was only bold. Not smart. Ryan received a copy of her email in his inbox. The subject line still read, Marla, final rebuild. He forwarded it to Marcus with one line. She didn't just fake a signature, she built a criminal identity. The next morning, the court issued a formal criminal summons to Melissa Morgan, aka Melissa Jensen, aka Marla Jennings. If she failed to appear, a warrant would follow. Ryan sat quietly at his desk, reading the signature one more time. His own name malformed, bent, abused. But now official. Proof. Not just that she had betrayed him, but that she had done so with intent. She wore my name like a costume. Now the law knows it wasn't hers to wear. She thought she could bury herself in new names, but paper identities burn fast in the heat of the truth. Melissa showed up to the arraignment wearing a grey suit, stiff, unfamiliar, too formal for the woman who used to walk barefoot in their kitchen and quote poetry from memory. She didn't look like herself. That was the point. A new name, a new haircut, a new story. But behind all of it, Ryan could see what was left, a cornered woman rehearsing damage control. The courtroom was fuller than before. Word had spread. A financial crime involving marital fraud always drew attention in court circles, especially when it crossed state lines and included wire transfers, shell corporations, and an ex-boyfriend turned witness. Melissa's new attorney tried to play it down. She is a woman navigating trauma. The events took place during a time of extreme emotional duress. Marcus didn't even stand to respond. He slid a single page forward to the clerk. The judge read it silently, then adjusted her glasses. Email correspondence between the defendant and a co-conspirator outlining plans to liquidate marital assets, create false identities, and flee the state prior to the plaintiff's surgery. The words landed like gunshots. Melissa's jaw tightened. She didn't flinch, but she didn't deny it either. The courtroom hushed. The judge turned toward her. "Mrs. Morgan, are you denying the authenticity of this communication?" Melissa opened her mouth, then closed it. Her lawyer whispered something. She gave the faintest nod. "No, Your Honor, I'm not." It wasn't a confession, but it was surrender. The judge continued. "You stand charged with multiple counts of financial fraud, identity misrepresentation, and attempted interstate asset concealment. A guilty verdict will carry up to 5 years in prison and significant restitution orders." Melissa looked at the floor. Ryan looked at her. This wasn't the woman who kissed his forehead and promised to be there when he woke up. That woman was an invention. A mask worn just long enough to buy time. What stood before him now wasn't even the villain, just a liar caught in the beam of cold light. Court adjourned for the day. Outside, reporters waited, but Melissa was ushered out through a side door. Ryan didn't follow. He didn't need to see her anymore. That night, Marcus forwarded him a new file, evidence recovered from Daniel's phone backups, audio clips. He listened to them in his apartment alone. In one, Melissa's voice echoed softly. "He's too methodical. If he finds out, he won't scream. He'll build a case. He'll bury us in facts." She had known this was possible, but she hadn't prepared for how fast it would fall apart. Another clip. "If we just vanish for a year, let the emotions die down, we can negotiate from strength." Ryan paused the playback. She never planned to face him. She had bet everything on his silence, on his supposed weakness. Instead, she'd awakened something else. In the days that followed, prosecutors finalized a formal plea offer, a reduced sentence in exchange for full restitution and a complete list of all accounts, holdings, and foreign affiliations. Melissa had 48 hours to decide. Daniel had already signed his deal. Melissa hesitated, until Jason called with an update. Her new alias was flagged on a passport application. She was trying to leave the country. Ryan sent that information directly to Marcus, who had it in the court record before noon. The plea offer was withdrawn. She would go to trial. No more deals, no more masks. The prosecution began preparing a timeline. 7 years of marriage reduced to bullet points and bank statements. Every vacation used to scout new cities. Every girls' trip with Daniel. Every lie documented, time-stamped, court-certified. Ryan reviewed it all, not with rage, with precision. He wasn't here for vengeance anymore. He was here for judgment. She hid behind identities, behind loopholes, behind love, but in the end, there was only one truth left, and it had my name on it. He was her getaway plan, but every escape route leaks when your partner folds. Daniel Martin took the stand in a charcoal blazer 2 sizes too large, eyes sunken, voice thin. He didn't look like a conspirator anymore. He looked like a man who'd realized too late that the woman he helped steal from had always planned to leave him too. Ryan watched without expression. He didn't need to enjoy this. The math was already done. This wasn't about revenge. This was about leverage. And Daniel had just delivered the final payload. Under oath, Daniel spoke clearly. "Yes, Melissa Morgan approached me 3 months before Ryan Morgan's surgery and laid out a plan to access joint marital funds." He paused, swallowed hard. "She said Ryan wouldn't recover, that his cancer was more advanced than he was telling anyone, that she was preparing for a life after." The courtroom was silent. "And you believed her?" the prosecutor asked. Daniel hesitated. "I wanted to." That was the moment Ryan knew. Daniel hadn't just been a co-conspirator. He'd been a Mark II, a pawn in Melissa's plan. She used his ego, his desire to feel needed, and his history with her to weaponize him into an accomplice. "Did she promise you anything?" the prosecutor continued. "She promised we'd start fresh," Daniel said, voice brittle. "That we'd move to Costa Rica, start a private health retreat. She said we could live off Ryan's money for a year while we built the business." Ryan closed his eyes. Not out of pain, out of disbelief. Even now, the scheme kept mutating, expanding like mold in a sealed room. Melissa hadn't just stolen, she'd tried to repurpose his life into some twisted fantasy startup. And the shell company, Coastal Pine Ventures? The prosecutor asked. Daniel nodded. She had it set up in my name, but she controlled all the banking. She told me she'd handle the paperwork because, well, I had a record. And did she? Yes. And the money? She took most of it. I only saw about 8,000. The prosecutor leaned forward. And when the accounts froze? She shut me out, Daniel replied. Told me to find my own way out. Blocked my number the next day. Betrayal full circle. Melissa didn't flinch, but her lawyer did. The judge intervened. Let the record reflect. Mr. Daniel Martin's testimony corroborates the plaintiff's financial fraud allegations and confirms the defendant's intentional misuse of marital assets. Then came the cross-examination. Melissa's attorney tried to frame Daniel as bitter, jealous, a man scorned, but each question only painted Melissa darker. You're telling us she used you for financial gain? Yes. And you never questioned her intentions? I did, but every time I brought it up, she reminded me that we were in this together, that Ryan didn't deserve what he had. That last sentence hit like a brick. Melissa had fed Daniel a narrative where Ryan was the villain, unfaithful, controlling, cold. Ryan sat motionless. He didn't need to defend himself. The facts were doing it for him. When Daniel stepped down from the stand, he looked over once, almost sheepishly. Ryan gave him nothing in return. He wasn't here to forgive. He was here to finish. That afternoon, Marcus approached with a grin he hadn't worn since the case began. She just lost the jury, completely. How do you know? Ryan asked. They stopped looking at her like a woman who made a mistake. Now they see her as an architect of betrayal. Melissa's own lawyer requested a recess. Off the record, Marcus caught wind of it. Internal conflict. Melissa had started rejecting her own counsel's advice. She wanted to testify herself. Arrogance or desperation, it didn't matter. Let her speak. Let her bury herself. The prosecution had already laid the trap. 10 documented lies, all provable. If she slipped on even one, the perjury charge would stack on top of the fraud and the plea deals would vanish forever. That night, Ryan returned to his apartment and stared at the one photo he hadn't deleted, their wedding day. Melissa in ivory lace, eyes bright, smile gentle. He didn't feel regret. He felt confirmation. Every mask she wore had cracked, every accomplice had turned, and now, standing at the edge of trial's end, she had only herself to blame. She tried to weaponize a man against me, but all she built with him was a witness stand and a confession. Lies are delicate weapons. In court, they shatter under oath. The final day of trial felt less like a courtroom and more like a crucible. Every chair was filled. Journalists in the back row typed furiously. Law students sat in silent awe. And in the center, Melissa, the defendant once cloaked in poise and silence, now exposed under relentless light. She had decided to testify. Against every strategic recommendation, Melissa took the stand. Her voice, once so measured, cracked before the first answer left her lips. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she said. It was the last honest thing she said all day. Her testimony began like theater, remorseful, wounded, weaving a narrative where she was scared, isolated, trapped in a marriage defined by medical dread and emotional neglect. She told the jury she felt Ryan slipping away long before the diagnosis. I panicked, she said, eyes glistening. I thought I was going to be a widow. I didn't know what to do. I acted out of fear, not malice. For a moment, a sliver of the room seemed to lean her way. Then the prosecution began. The attorney didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Mrs. Morgan, did you or did you not file for divorce 2 days before your husband entered surgery? Melissa hesitated. Yes, but did you or did you not create a business entity under a false name? Yes. Did you or did you not forge your husband's signature on a federal investment withdrawal form? A pause, too long. I didn't forge it. I replicated it. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Mrs. Morgan, the prosecutor said flatly, you used his medical records to impersonate him in a call with Vanguard. Do you deny this? Melissa looked down. No. And is it true that you opened at least 3 bank accounts under the alias Marla Jennings and directed funds from your marital assets into those accounts? Yes. And that you lied to your partner, Mr. Daniel Martin, about your husband's condition to encourage him to assist in your financial plan? Silence. Then, finally, yes. Ryan watched her face as she unraveled, the tension in her jaw, the tight blink every time the truth struck harder than she wanted to admit. She wasn't performing anymore, she was surviving, but every answer stitched her deeper into the narrative she could no longer control. The prosecutor delivered the closing argument like a scalpel, not a hammer. Melissa Morgan did not make a mistake. She made a map, a plan, a schedule, and she followed it with clinical precision. This wasn't a woman reacting to grief. This was a woman gambling on her husband's vulnerability and losing that bet. When it was Marcus's turn, he stood slowly and addressed the jury. My client trusted the defendant with everything: his health, his home, his future. She didn't just betray him emotionally, she dismantled him financially, strategically, and without hesitation. You've seen the evidence, you've heard the voices, now all that's left is accountability. The judge recessed for deliberation. It took the jury less than 3 hours. Ryan didn't pace. He sat still, breathing evenly, eyes focused. When the foreperson returned, the courtroom stilled. On the count of identity fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of financial fraud, guilty. On the count of wire fraud, guilty. On the count of attempted asset concealment, guilty. And finally, on the charge of criminal impersonation with intent to defraud, guilty. Melissa didn't cry. She closed her eyes, not in protest, not in peace, in resignation. The judge cleared her throat. Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks. Bail is hereby revoked due to attempted flight risk. A bailiff approached. Melissa stood, cuffed quietly, and was escorted out the side door. She didn't look at Ryan, not once. He stood only after she was gone. Outside the courtroom, Marcus handed him a folded sheet. It was the prosecution's official restitution recommendation, $122,000 plus damages and legal costs. Any comment? A reporter called. Ryan paused. He didn't give them a quote. He didn't need to. The verdict had said enough. She brought her truth to court, but truth without integrity collapses, and now the world knows the story she tried to rewrite in my name. Some people fall all at once. Others come apart piece by piece until there's nothing left but apologies no one asked for. The sentencing took place 14 days later in a smaller courtroom. No cameras, no jury, just a judge with a thick stack of transcripts and 2 parties sitting opposite each other. One man who had lost everything and rebuilt it with evidence, and one woman who gambled it all and lost. Melissa was already seated when Ryan arrived. No makeup, no blazer, just a beige prison-issue jumpsuit and the brittle silence of someone who had finally run out of defenses. She didn't look up when the judge entered, didn't react when the charges were read aloud one final time. But when the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Melissa rose slowly. Her hands trembled as she gripped the podium. "I know I've destroyed something I can't fix," she began, voice flat, eyes locked on the floor. "I made choices, I built lies, I convinced myself I deserved a different life, and I told myself that what I was doing wasn't really theft because it came from someone who loved me." A pause, heavy, almost performative. "I can't ask for forgiveness, but I am sorry." She finally looked at Ryan. "I thought you were too strong to break, that you'd move on. I didn't think you'd fight back, I didn't think you'd care." Ryan didn't move, didn't blink, because she was right. He had cared, and now he didn't. The judge didn't offer sympathy. This court recognizes premeditated intent, sustained deceit, and calculated misuse of legal structures. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 2 years of state incarceration with eligibility for parole after 14 months. Full restitution of $122,000 is ordered, plus court costs and financial damages totaling $31,700. Additionally, the defendant is barred from opening any joint accounts, holding financial power of attorney, or operating business entities for 5 years. Melissa didn't cry, not even when the handcuffs clicked shut again. She walked out with the same posture she'd used when leaving their apartment months ago, head high, back straight, pretending she still had control. But there was nothing left to control. Daniel had moved to Arizona, changed his number, and started driving for a rideshare service. Melissa's shell companies had been dissolved, their assets liquidated to satisfy court orders. Her Florida condo had been seized and sold under forfeiture rules. And her name? Permanently tied to 6 felony convictions in the federal registry. Ryan stepped outside into the afternoon sun, unburdened. He had thought there would be a catharsis, a swell of satisfaction, a sense of finality, but there was only quiet, like the air after a fire has burned itself out. Marcus walked beside him. "You won," he said. Ryan nodded. "No, I just stopped losing you." In the weeks that followed, restitution payments began flowing in through garnished assets and trust reallocations. Every dollar was itemized, tracked, documented. Ryan didn't spend a cent. He had already rebuilt financially through his work, and the quiet consulting contracts that followed after his story gained traction in business circles. People admired the restraint, the clarity, the blueprint for how to fight back without losing your soul. But Ryan didn't care for admiration. He cared for control. He reopened his private LLC, one Melissa never knew existed. With Marcus's help, he started building a new layer of personal security, all accounts under layered encryption, no shared access, a digital fortress around everything she had once touched. Because the collapse of Melissa wasn't just about punishment, it was about never letting anyone like her in again. One day, a letter arrived in his mailbox. From prison, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Neat, sharp, familiar. He never opened it, just held it for a moment, then dropped it into the shredder. Because he didn't need her version of closure, he had already written his own. She collapsed slowly, but thoroughly, and I walked away from the wreckage, not broken, but rebuilt. There was no parade, no victory speech, just peace, quiet, unshared, and entirely mine. 6 months later, Ryan stood at the edge of Lake Michigan, wind cutting against his jacket, hands buried in his pockets. The sun crept low behind the skyline, and the cold didn't bother him anymore. He had weathered worse. Chicago was still the same city, same sirens, same trains screaming into tunnels, same wind whistling down the concrete corridors, but Ryan had changed. Not outwardly, not in ways anyone would notice, but inside, nothing Melissa had touched remained. He'd sold the old apartment, moved into a converted loft overlooking the water, no shared drawers, no memories stuck in the corners, just space. Clean, modular, functional. Every item had purpose. Nothing wasted, nothing sentimental. His name was clean, his accounts were secure, the restitution payments had been completed ahead of schedule through asset liquidation. The $122,000 was back, but untouched. It sat in a new account under a trust he'd named after his father. A quiet nod to someone who had taught him the value of building slowly, losing carefully, and recovering on his own terms. The world around him had started to settle. The story of Melissa's trial had run its course. The press moved on to other scandals. Friends stopped asking what happened. Even Daniel had disappeared, likely somewhere quieter, where shame didn't follow him into every store. And Melissa, still serving her sentence in a medium security facility in upstate Illinois. No parole granted, her behavior described as uncooperative. She had filed no appeals, sent no more letters. She had vanished finally, not into Florida or a fake name, but into silence. The same silence she had left him with that morning in the hospital, only now it no longer hurt, it comforted. Ryan didn't date, not yet. He wasn't hiding, but he wasn't rushing. Trust had to be earned now, measured not by words but by patterns, consistency, and an absence of masks. He focused on work. The side consulting grew into a niche service for high net worth clients needing digital asset protection during complex divorces. Irony perhaps, but Ryan never laughed at it, he just worked. Quietly, thoroughly, precisely. In the evenings he read, mostly non-fiction, stories of resilience, recovery, reinvention. One night, while sorting old digital backups, he found a folder labeled Us. Inside were hundreds of photos, trips, holidays, birthdays, smiling faces in warm light. He deleted it without hesitation because he no longer needed the reminder of what was lost. He had something better, the knowledge of what he had survived. Later that week, he visited his old oncology specialist for a follow-up. The news was good, no signs of recurrence, liver function, stable, prognosis, excellent. You look lighter, the doctor said, scanning his chart. Ryan offered a faint smile. I dropped about 130 pounds of dead weight. He left the clinic with the sun on his shoulders, no dramatic music, no swelling orchestras, just the rhythm of feet against pavement. The world finally aligned under his own name, his own terms. Before going home, he stopped at the lakeside once more. Same bench, same view, different man. He sat quietly for 20 minutes, just breathing. No more paperwork, no more subpoenas, no more strategy, just air. And silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty, the kind you earn. She thought taking everything would leave me with nothing, but silence, peace, and self-respect were never hers to steal.